is the Rangers Journal Night.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of the Rangers Journal. My name's Rob Harron. I'll be your host for this evening, and we have three delightful guests with me. Kev, how are you doing tonight, pal?
I'm great. Feeling a bit tired, but these usually wake us up, so glad to be on.
I'm sure we'll have an interesting discussion ahead of us. Mitch, how are we tonight?
All the better for seeing you boys. Nothing better for it. Especially Dino with his wee mobile phone ring light now.
Glad to hear it. Last but not least, Ian, how are we tonight?
I'm very good, mate. Looking forward to this one.
Glad to hear it. So, a couple of bits of admin before we get into the nitty gritty. So, in association with Mano and Inverclyde, and also we're now proudly sponsored by Premier VPN, as you can see, fast, safe, and private. We are the journal sponsors for the time being. So, thanks very much for giving us a sponsor, guys. So, go and check them out. And with that being said, we will get right into it. Tonight's topic is the Director of Football candidates. I know that it's kind of went quiet over the last wee while, and we've been missing a Director of Football for quite some time. So we'll maybe open it up first before we go into the slides, which again have been proudly provided by Doug. So thanks again, Doug, for the slides. So I'll open up to yourself, Kev, all right, in the first instance. So just your thoughts on the Director of Football role. What do you think of it? Do we need it? And if we do, then what are you looking for in the candidates that hopefully we'll see in the near future?
I think definitely in modern day football, I think there's definitely a need for a Director of Football. I think probably gone are the days where you had a team manager who sort of managed everything amongst the club. If you're going back to the likes of like your Walter Smiths or your Sir Alex Fergusons at Man United, I think you definitely need someone above to try and help pull everyone in the right direction. I think it'll be interesting to see what approach that the board take. We obviously have Niels Coppin, who will probably predominantly look after everything in the recruitment side of things, which I think so far, I think he's done a decent enough job. You can maybe argue that it's been a good job with the sort of limited budget that he's had to have. It's obviously been a downsize he's had to carry out, as well as a rebuild in the summer there. I think in terms of the Director of Football role, I know Mitch will probably come in. I think he was talking earlier that he's got a list of things that he's looking for. But I think for me, I think someone that can probably just help pull the club in the right direction from the academy right through to the first team. I'm probably not too precious with it having to be a Rangers man within there. I think there probably does need to be some element of that introduced in the club. I think if you could kill two birds with one stone and maybe have someone that is a Rangers man with similar experience to doing a role like that, then yeah, that would be great. But I think we just need someone that's going to be able to come in, be able to have a good relationship with both the manager, but also with the board, and then also having probably the ability to challenge the board as well in terms of getting Niels Coppin and Clement the money to be able to go and make transfers and continue this rebuild on. So having the strength, I think, to try and back the manager to the board and being able to have a good relationship as well as working well with whoever the head of academy is going to be. I think it's such a crazy time right now, but we're sitting with so many key roles that are vacant right now. Obviously tonight we'll discuss the Director of Football only, but yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, no, you make good points here, Kev. I think it's definitely something that is far more prevalent in football today than it was even 15, 20 years ago. It's definitely a kind of emerging role that seemed to have kind of cropped up out of nowhere, but now seems pivotal for most of the big football clubs in the world. I think it's definitely something that we probably need to help Niels Coppin and the manager. Not to kind of undermine Coppin in the football recruitment role, or the manager for that matter. Dino, I'll come to you next. Just because when I come to Mitch, I'll probably pull up his slide that he asked for. So, what are your thoughts on the Director of Football? Are you similar to Kev's thought, and in the sense that it's needed, or do you have a kind of a different opinion?
No, it's definitely imperative for the way that a modern day football club is run, like what Kevin said there. I think one of the key elements for it, for me, is basically every age group playing the same way that the first team plays. And I'm going to just quickly use Ross McCausland as an example. So say Clement came in when Gio did, or Bale did, right, and he'd been there a wee bit longer than what he is just now. And McCausland is already playing in that left wing role, coming in on the right hand side. What I'm just meaning is the sort of transition for him to then go and play in that position is not going to be as there isn't going to be so much of a disparity in terms of his ability to play in that position. So that for me is very important. And obviously, things what Kev touched on there, and the finances for for players and things like that, being the voice for the sort of coaching staff and the management and things like that, to say that this is the player that we've identified. We need this amount of money. We need you to go and sign him, basically. So, from top to bottom, it's definitely needed for any modern day football club to have any longevity in terms of success.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with that one. It definitely seems a marker for helping the progression and evolution of players, younger players at the club, and hopefully with any potential director of football coming in, they can definitely help unearth more talent, even if it's not at Rangers at the moment, but try and bring the best of the youth from elsewhere in. Even the likes of over the summer, with Clinton and Ciala coming in. I know we've not seen him in the first team, but again, it's maybe the moves in that sense. Apologies, he's obviously seen as one for the future, having been with the AC Milan youth team, and hopefully he makes that step up into the first team sooner rather than later. So, last but not least, Mitch, what are your thoughts on the director of football? And I think that'll try and add the slide to the stage as well. There we go. So I know you had some questions or some qualities that you think the director of football must have. So I don't know if you want to just go through the points, we'll just maybe try and take them as they come up. You're on mute, mate.
We're off to a cracking start there, aren't we? So I'll kind of whip through them without, and we can obviously kind of layer out the bits that we all want to layer out on it. I think for me, in terms of what does the candidate look like and what the shortlist should look like, those names on it should be, candidates that have experience at operating at a club at a high level like us. Because let's be honest, we are, as much as we're playing in Scotland, we're playing Europa League level consistently, season in, season out, with the view of turning that into Champions League level, season in, season out. And I think as well, obviously they've got to have a really good background within football. It can't be somebody that's just trotted out of nowhere pretty much and plucked from the world of business. I think that kind of goes without saying. And I think a key point that shouldn't really be missed is somebody that's in tune with their data-driven model of player recruitment. It is probably quite a forward-thinking model behind the recruitment, but it also has to be something that's implemented well and structured well behind it as well. They've got to come from a club with a good, I would have said at least a good stature behind them. Ideally, Prem experience or top 5 Euro League. That might be outside of our price range right now, we're not sure. But I think obviously as well, as Kev touched on earlier on, for me, I don't care if they're a Rangers man or not. I just care that they're the most qualified person for the job. Don't care if they're purple from Swahili, and I don't care, where they came from, as long as they are the most qualified person for the job. But also, there's got to be some questions, as always, when it comes to recruitment about why does that candidate want to come to Rangers, and why do they want to come to Rangers now? Is it somebody looking to use us as a launch pad for their career, which is, again, fine. We can live with that. That's not the end of the world. But I think as well, it's also got to be, if it's an older candidate, is it somebody looking for one last hurrah to top up the pension pot before they're done. So yeah, and what makes them interested in being our director of football is it, how do they align with the club's goals, culture, the direction where the club's going, both past and present, because I think to move forward, you can't ignore the past, and they've got to be aware of an element of fan scepticism behind signings and behind the recruitment model. So they've got to be willing to be quite forward-facing and join pressers as well. So be comfortable talking to people, such that, probably to the same extent that, Gilligan's been right now of, you don't need to pop in every week because there's not much to tell us every week. But pop in every couple of months or so, and certainly we don't want to see you going AWOL during January and during the summer.
Yeah. Yeah, I take him on board, Mitch. I think it seems to be the main questions when the director of football pops up, more so for us because we seem to never, or the last couple of cases, we just don't seem to have got the right man in the job. I do think as you say, it's trying to find that balance between the football knowledge or the football background and the business background, and trying to make sure that they align with both sides of the club, on the park and off of it. Kev, what are your thoughts on the kind of points that Mitch has brought up there, in terms of, the experience and why Rangers, what's your thoughts on it?
I've got to agree with what Mitch is saying. I think that there definitely needs to be a great degree of experience. Maybe not even necessarily, I don't think the experience has to be that they've worked within a director of football role before, but someone has worked within the background of looking after certain key areas that I think our director of football is going to carry out. Especially when I'm looking at the way Rangers are probably set up now, we probably won't be looking for that typical director of football that we've had historically, because if we look at Ross Wilson, for example, when he was there, he looked after everything from transfers all the way through to managing from overseeing the youth academy and the sort of playing side. Whereas I think because we've got Niels Kopp in there, he is going to be the one that predominantly looks after all the recruitment, and the director of football potential come in looking at more the sporting side. I think we looked at examples of how other clubs are run. I actually seen in the comments when I checked them quickly as well, and someone actually mentions Norderslund, which was one of the clubs that I'd brought up the last time we were looking into the director of football and head of youth academies, etc. And they've got a similar setup, what I presume that we're going to be looking to do, where they had two people doing a similar role, one looking after the transfer side, then someone that looked after the sporting side, which was that overseeing of the playing squads, the youth academy. And I think it's just important that we've got someone that's got some level of experience, or not some, but a good level of experience of working within these sort of fields. Because at the end of the day, I think Rangers are going to be a stepping stone at all different levels, from youth academy to our first team squad to director of football's managers. And I suppose the unfortunate thing when you're a Rangers fan is that you either have a manager who does incredibly well and will move on to bigger and better things, or you'll have a manager who underperforms and then is left. And what you need for a director of football is someone that's able to oversee everything that's going on within that first team, that you can then continuously build on that. And it's not that, okay, we've got a new manager, so we just start from scratch again. I think that's the purpose of having a director of football, is that so we don't just rebuild, do well, fall away, then have to rebuild again. I think it's just so we can continuously get better. And I think that's why it's important we've got it. And we've got someone with experience that have overlooked some of these football departments. Don't think it needs to be someone who is a director of football at a big club, because I think the question will be is why would he then come to Rangers? But if we can maybe get someone, and I don't know if David Weir's actually on the slides later, who's been working within the background of football, doing numerous different roles, knows the club, can he come in and potentially put some of his ideas across that can maybe fill into that role? Has a wealth of experience, not necessarily a director of football, but could we get someone like that where it's a jump up for them in terms of role, but they do come with a wealth of experience? Because at the end of the day, we're probably not going to go and get a director of football from an Ajax, a PSV, a Man City, an Arsenal, whoever, because they would see that as a step down, unfortunately, coming to Rangers. But could we look at some clubs like a Brighton, where David Weir's been working for some years now, who do have a really good model, really good player trading model, being fairly competitive within the Premier League, got European football a couple of seasons ago. Could we get someone like that, but this is a step up for them? So they come with experience, like Mitch is saying, but I think it's going to be really difficult for Rangers to go and get an experienced director of football to come to Rangers. If we were to look at that, it's probably going to be from a club that, and no disrespect, but will be of a lower standard than what we are just now.
Sure, no, I definitely agree, Kev. I think, I know we're linked in the past, not only with Davy Weir, but with Paul Mitchell, who I think now went to Newcastle. I think he went to in the summer.
That's right. Yeah, he replaced the lad that went off to Man U.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, because I was looking into it today just to try and do a bit of research and seen Dan Ashworth had left Newcastle, go to Man U now, and his replacement was Paul Mitchell, who was at Monaco with Clermont. So again, that would have probably been a good choice because the manager and the director of football have worked together in the past. Do you think that's maybe something that the club are looking at in terms of previous relationships between the likes of Niels Coppin and Clermont and the potential new director of football? Do you think there needs to be a relationship or prior relationship with someone that may potentially come into the club?
I've got arguments for both sides of that, to be quite honest with you. I think you could actually have somebody who does have experience in the role, who is coming to use us as a stepping stone, which is only going to be a good thing for us because you know that they're going to be coming in and actually going to give it their all because they want to go on to, bigger salary and, bigger this and that. So that's something that I think we should not actually be, too against as fans. But in saying that, like what you said there about Davy Weir and that relationship with our club, and then you just think of Davy Weir as being the sort of person who would command that respect from the hierarchy within our club, and that he's going to be, doing everything in the Davy Weir way. So that would be something that would be very interesting, and it would be a bit of a coup for us to get, in my opinion, somebody like Davy Weir in. So I think there's loads of mitigating factors for the role, and all it takes is the right personality to come in, and somebody that may have experience in the director of football role, but they're mid-40s. So I would prefer somebody to have experience but still have years in them, as to somebody that's experienced at the age of maybe 60, 65 type coming in for me. That was kind of where I would want the sort of...
You're saying no Neil Warnock to the end of the season then?
Aye. So that's kind of where I would be happy with if that was to, be the case, because I think you've got somebody that's maybe a bit older coming in and that, and just wouldn't really be, maybe not as hungry for me. I don't know, I could be wrong, but if there is somebody that's also got experience in relationships with the manager and Coppin, then I would definitely be interested in, seeing what that could do, because they're here for the long haul, aren't they? So we've got to think what ways of making them better and us better. Is there somebody there that could come in and work with them and improve every faction of the club?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely an interesting one. I think my thought process had kind of went towards what Niels Coppin, I think, he'd put out in his interview in the last week or so, in terms of even in the summer looking at player signings, and obviously one of them never came to fruition because they seen that the player in question didn't seem to have the passion to, or the willingness, for lack of a better word, to want to play for Rangers. They were maybe already looking at their next move, or had questions over coming to play, and maybe that's something they're taking into consideration when looking at the director of football candidates. Is it somebody that has a hunger? Are they a young, younger, hungry, up and coming director of football at a lower league club, whether that's in the UK or in Europe or further afield, and they'll use us as a stepping stone to bigger and better things. But we try and utilise them like we're doing on the player side to get the best of their potential out of them before they we could potentially move on for some form of profit. I definitely think it's definitely ideas that the footballing board will be looking at, for sure. But I think my thought in terms of the director of football candidate was just when I was mentioning about the relationship with Clement. I know it's been mentioned, I think, in general media recently about Dimitri de Conda. He's currently the technical director of Genk, which obviously Clement was formerly the manager of. Just quickly looking on transfer market, he was appointed in 2015, so he's been there for quite a while. And maybe he'll be looking for another challenge. He did help Clement to win some silverware while he was there, easy for me to say. And I know that was definitely someone that I think had been of interest, just again due to that relationship with the manager previously.
I don't know if that's one of these candidates though, where it's maybe a bit of a lazy and easy link to make though. I think, no disrespect to Genk, but I think there's a big difference between the league that they operate in and the level that we operate in. But then at the same token, I think for me as well, though, when it comes to looking at experienced candidates and the who should be in there, I think obviously some of the points have been raised before of, there are probably some rougher diamonds out there in that League One Championship level who have, due to budgetary constraints at clubs, they've had to get used to buying in at a lower value but selling on at really, and I look at, for example, like the lad that's over at Peterborough, for example, great track record of buying players in really cheap, selling them on when the price is right, and worked his way around that model there. And I don't know if he's currently still at Peterborough or not, but I know he's been with Darren Ferguson, obviously, for a lot of years now. And again, that's probably a slightly more left field option, going from one extreme to the other of what I would like on my slides versus, the practicalities. But I think one thing we'll probably not struggle for is quality candidates. And I will safely say, as somebody who works in recruitment, it's going through the shortlists. It's probably harder to whittle down the list of candidates to the right people than it is to get the list of candidates for the right people. You could have 60 CVs land on your desk on Monday, but it's how you pick, 10 of those candidates that make up your shortlist there to start the interviews with. But what is positive, though, coming from the club is the fact that I know Gilligan's mentioned that he felt it was maybe going to be a bit of a pipe dream to get somebody in by Christmas. I think with the noises coming out the club, obviously, during the week there, we've got a shortlist drafted, but we're probably close to starting getting interviews done. If there's somebody who's actively in a role at the moment, that is probably going to be a 2 to 3 month, resignation period for them, unless we want to go through a protracted process, basically, of buying them out of contracts, and then you end up in that Newcastle Man United settlement, statement that stalemate that they ended up in over the summer there to get Paul Mitchell moving, or was it Paul Mitchell, the lad that went from Newcastle to Man United? They ended up going through a full rigmarole of, I think there was a rumoured fee of about 15 million quid for, don't get me wrong, we're certainly not going to be operating in that stratosphere there before Kev loses his hair. But, I think the process is probably further down the line than we think. But I think there's probably, in terms of candidate makeup, there is probably rougher diamonds out there from the likes of lower end of Championship. You even look at the lad over at Cardiff that's done an exceptional job probably right now under the circumstances they've been in under the last, 2 to 3 seasons now, with the whole, Emilio, I can't remember the lad's surname, but the lad that was involved in the terrible crash and stuff, and the legal ramifications that fell off the back of it, and the transfer embargoes and everything else that came off that. you see, you know, if you want to talk about a man that's been in the coalface of a fire, there's a man right there that's been in the coalface of a fire, and he's still managed to put out a team that's survived and into this season, particularly doing reasonably well in the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's going to be the difficulty for us, Mitch. That no matter who we go for, it's probably it's going to be somebody from left field. It's not somebody that's going to maybe be in the public eye. As much as we would all like to have, you know, someone come in that we were aware of, either as a, you know, previous, you know, member of the club, or someone that, you know, has an association with the club. Yeah, I think for me it's definitely a difficult one moving forward in terms of names of candidates, because again, it's not as I think we've all found out today. It's probably not as easy to find out who director of footballs are, if they're available, and what type of pedigree they've got that may be, you know, something that the club are looking at. I know I mentioned that, you know, there was mention in the comments at the start about Davy Weir, and I think we'll throw this up just to give us a talking point as another potential candidate. Again, he's somebody that's obviously played for the club. He's captained the club. You know, brought good success to the club while he was here. As you can see there, he's, you know, currently the technical director at Brighton since 2019. He's obviously been assistant manager at us, Brentford and Nottingham Forest. Over 160 appearances for the club, but also played in Scotland and England down at Everton as well as the national team. Kev, I know you'd mentioned some points about David Weir before. What would you think of David Weir coming in as the potential director of football for the club?
To be fair, I think I'd be quite comfortable with it. I think if it was coming in to maybe do the old school version of whatever director of football did, similar to what Ross Wilson was, where he looked after the player trading, player contracts, as well as looking after all the sporting side of stuff, that I would have more concerns, because he generally would have no experience out with maybe sitting and having some conversations with players as assistant manager. But I think the fact that we've got Niels Coppin, who's predominantly going to be looking after the player trading side of things, negotiating contracts, finding out the players, and probably overseeing the recruitment team. I think I'd be quite comfortable with David Weir coming in and overseeing the academy, overseeing what the recruitment looks like, and then being that sort of connection between Philip Clement and the CEO whenever obviously we recruit said position, and as well as the other board members. I think I'd be quite comfortable with him coming in and doing that. I think a part of his role as technical director at Brighton, as well as he oversees a lot of the young players out on loan as well. So he does have experience working with young academy boys. I think that's what we did our podcast on our academy in general last week, and probably the sort of dire condition it's in at the moment. So I think probably having someone coming in with that experience to oversee it, and it obviously does give that sort of checkpoint of he's a Rangers man, he obviously knows the club, he knows what the standards are and the expectations. May not have the experience of that title of director of football, but he certainly comes with a lot of experience, both from his playing career, assistant manager, currently technical director at Brighton. I think he also had a short spell as manager, I believe. Don't think it lasted particularly long, but he's got that as well. So I think it would be good. I don't think there necessarily has to be having a personal connection with Clement. At the end of the day, he'll be a part of the decision making if things aren't going well and what would need to happen with Clement. I think they just need to have a good working relationship, which I'd imagine if recruited, that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, I'm probably a big advocate for David Weir coming in, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't have any issues with him coming in, Kev. I think, you know, he's remembered fondly by the majority of Rangers fans, if not all Rangers fans, for his playing career with the club. I know there was a bit of acrimony when he was assistant manager when he left, but that's maybe put to one side in favour of the success he brought us on the park. Dean, what are your thoughts on Davy Weir as a potential director of football candidate? Would you be happy to see him come in, and do you think there's any other qualities that Kev maybe hasn't mentioned that you think he would help bring even back to the club, having worked under the likes of Walter Smith in the past?
There's one thing I think a lot of fans are saying that we've lost as their standards or Rangers standards, and that man would come in and bring those standards in with his first step on the marble staircase. And I think he would give the Rangers fans one almighty lift that we're actually probably needing, let's be honest, at the moment. So there's those things, I think, for me in terms of that. So that's going to be, because I think it was yourself, Bob, that said earlier on, the Rangers fans are going to be sceptical. There wouldn't be as much scepticism with Davy Weir, I don't think, because of the aforementioned attributes that he brings in terms of his experience, what he's done at Brighton, things like that. And playing experience is what I meant there. So yeah, I'm banging the same drum as Kev. I'd be a massive advocate for him as well. And I think, as I said, it would be you would have faith and trust in him being that strong voice for the management and things like that. And he'd be coming in, you'd know for a fact that he would just command that respect. He wouldn't need to, I don't think, to prove himself to actually attain it. So yeah, I would be all over that.
And see if I can just jump back in as well. I think probably one thing not to downplay as well, the fact that the connections he's probably built within his time working within the Premier League would probably be huge for us as well. I think when you look at probably some of the conversations he's been involved in Brighton, and when you look at some of the players that they scout and bring in, they're obviously very data driven in terms of how they scout and recruit players, and they always buy below fees and sell them for huge profits. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has a little book of names that he could probably bring to Rangers and pass on to the likes of Niels Coppin, or he can maybe share some of the wisdom that Brighton have around their player trading model. I know obviously Hearts were exploring the possibility of having the Brighton owner being involved with themselves, and he would bring in their information. I think we could get David Weir in without actually having to get the investment. So I think it would be a good one. And I think on top of that, probably what I didn't mention as well is probably just his leadership qualities. It's something he had as a player. I'd imagine he still carries that just now. I think you always hear good things of him when you hear ex-players talking about even his time as assistant manager at Rangers. So I think he obviously always comes across well, even going back to his playing days. So I think he's a clever guy, and I think it would be a good addition.
Yeah, I would disagree with that, Kev. I think, again, just because we're aware of him, he's obviously got a Rangers link from the past. I think it's definitely it'd probably be the one I'd like to see, just because of the experience he has with Brighton. Obviously the success they've had in the transfer market over the last few years is certainly proved successful for them, as well as the sell on, the profits that they've made from the talent they've managed to bring in. One of which was Mr. Sima, which we'll maybe not speak about too much tonight. But yeah,
cheers,
again,
Rob, I was having a good day, mate.
so sorry, Mitch. But yeah, obviously, like Sima, and that we've obviously had the benefit of having play for us. But again, the success that you've seen other players be down south, the players that they've got at the moment, are probably very destined to move on to bigger and better things for a far larger price than what they were brought in for. I see obviously there's a few comments as well for the likes of, I know Doug mentioned Michael Zorc. I did have a quick check on him. So he is 62, he's German. He was previously the technical director at Borussia Dortmund, but he's retired. But you never know, Doug. He could
football is anyone really retired?
Yeah, exactly. He could be tempted out of retirement if he's got some form of either a relationship with Coppin. You never know, or he's got a family member that's a mad blue nose. Who knows? I noticed as well in the chat, I can see there's Christian Erlinger.
Christian Erlinger has done a phenomenal job.
Yeah, that was the kind of other candidate that had come to mind. I know he'd been mentioned in the past. I'm not sure, again, just with the success he has had, is it Leverkusen he's at the moment in time, or is it
He's actually unattached, I think, just now.
is it unattached?
I think he left Leverkusen in the summer, I think.
Fair enough. I mean, again, that's definitely someone that it's probably the type of profile that we should be looking at, to bring into the club. In terms, again, has the link with the club, having played. All right, injuries blighted his time with us, but again, I think he's always remembered fondly. He scored the odd cracker as well. So again, he, as you said, Mitch, he's definitely some success. Say phenomenal, a great success at Leverkusen, especially with the way they've played over the last couple of years, as well.
There's also a couple of other names there floating about there at the moment that have done similar jobs as well. If we want to look at the ex-player market, a couple of people have mentioned there Carlos Bocanegra and what he done over at Atlanta. Amazing work over there. And then you look at guys like Craig Moore, who's out of work. He has actively performed essentially the same role over in Brisbane. Performed it for 3 years. And I know a lot of people will say, well, it's the A-League, and I can see Dean's face there with the snobbery in it, and I'm watching him. But the A-League versus the Scottish League, in terms of, Craig Moore did do a lot in terms of ambassadorial work and in terms of a lot of outreach work and stuff like that as well when he was there, and in terms of growing the stature of the club and making sure that the stands were filled, and also making sure they were filled with, by the standards of the A-League, probably the best players they could attract at that point. And it was actually quite smart in the windows that they shopped in. They shopped in those, for those players that were lower leagues across not just Europe, but also, like the J League and places like that, where you could say, tell you what, yeah, okay, we can give you similar money, if not a wee bit better than what you're on, but we can probably give you a hell of a lot better climate to go and do it in. I mean, you tell me, Dino, would you like to go and play in a cold, wet night in Stoke, or a nice, cold, wet night in Brisbane?
It's no comparison.
I don't think the A-League's anything to be scoffed at either. I hate to use Celtic as an example, but obviously they went out and got Ange Postecoglou, obviously a lot of experience managing in the A-League, and then obviously moving into other Asian leagues as well. I think if you look at Kevin Muscat as a manager who's predominantly managed in the A-League and now doing really well in Asia. I believe he was in the Asian Champions League final recently. I don't know how they got on. But I don't think it's anything to be scoffed at. I think at the end of the day, I don't think they have to necessarily come from a big club or have even worked for a big club. I think in any sort of management or leading positions, I think if you've got the skill set and the attributes and experience to be able to do the role, then you can do the role. I think you'll obviously throw names across here that we would love to see. Listen, we'll probably not be surprised if it's just something completely left field and someone we've never heard of, and we just hope that they come in and do a good job. I think it's just generally about going out and getting the right person. It'll be interesting to see if the director of football comes first, or if it's the CEO that will come first, or the chairman that comes first. Because I'd imagine these are all people that are going to be wanting to have these conversations to make sure that, one, they like the candidate and that they've assessed the skills, because at the end of the day, it's going to be them that's going to be working with them. So it's all fun and games. But yeah, I don't think Craig Moore is a bad shout. Actually, Mitch, it's funny you said that. I was actually Googling about Craig Moore, because I think there was not rumours as such, but I think his name was just getting thrown about the last time we done a similar podcast a few months back. And I was reading about it, and I could see the sort of different levels of roles that he's carried out within Australia. And I think he comes in with the same sort of stature as David Weir. He's been here when we're successful, played with the club, natural leader, as well as having experience in different areas in football.
I think as well, Craig Moore as well, he was, I think, had it not been for the pandemic, I've got a funny feeling that with the whole Wilson departure and things like that as well, it was probably somebody who was at least somewhere in the thoughts of the board at the time. But I think as well, obviously, I know he's now back in Glasgow full time, but I know obviously in that kind of weird period of post-pandemic life, I think he was kind of still splitting his time between here and Australia, because at the various points of where everybody was globally in terms of unlocking and whatnot. So I don't quite think I think last time out it was one of these ones of the two ships kind of just missed each other in terms of even sitting down having the conversation. But you know, the world's a much better place now, so you never know. I mean, but again, that would also come down to as you know, would he want the job now, or does he have ambitions of management of his own? Or I don't know if he's got. I also don't know if he's got a agency now. Like if he's agenting for like being an agent for some players at the moment.
He is. That's why I stopped googling him. If I'm honest, mate, I seen he'd like moved into something completely different, and I'd actually moved on. I think he runs a player agency, or he is at least a football agent. I read that on Wikipedia, so
Take that with what we can.
Yeah.
Do you know who's your candidate of choice?
Davy Weir for me all day long. I guess what Kev said, we did one a few months back. And there was a few different candidates, and the ones that were that day, I think Davy Weir was maybe my preferred option. Still is. I think the way that the club is at the moment as well, you know that you would have faith that Davy Weir would come in and essentially hit the ground running as well. Do you know? So we wouldn't need any time to build these IKEA drawers and things like that. So you know that he would come in and do, and it'd be like a duck to water. That's the point I'm trying to make.
It would be an easy enough transition for him. He can even bring his drawers with him from Brighton. We will not mind. I think that's probably. I think in the realms of probability, I don't think it's one of these ones of we would probably love to see it happen, but I think the chances of it happening are probably slender, and that's just putting a practical head on it of he's obviously going to have a considerable wage where he is just now. But I think also as well, it's there's probably a lot more doors open down south than what there is obviously here.
Yeah, I kind of disagree much. I think that's a difficulty. As you say, it's again just one of the comments that George has given us there. In terms of the money that we've got to spend on a director of football, it's all well and good discussing candidates, but again, it's dependent on how much the club and the board are willing to back that person with money in terms of bring them in, or what do you think?
Just on that comment, to be fair, I think the director of football will be not necessarily brought in just to get transfers and to invest into the team. I think in modern day football, because of how often football clubs change management and change all these roles within head academies. I mean, the last head of academy lasted what? Was it even a year that they was in the job? Football managers tend to rotate anywhere between 1 to 3 seasons. If you get a manager that does well, like I said earlier, he moves on. If he's doing rubbish, he gets sacked and we bring in a new one. I think the director of football is there to maintain a level of stability to work towards the same goal that as a club we're working towards. Because it's not necessarily going to be the way modern day teams are set up, especially teams that want to be successful. A manager isn't going to come in and dictate how he wants the club to be moving forward. The club will be saying, hey, this is what we're looking for and this is the way we want to play. This is the way we want to move the club in this direction. And I think the director of football is the actual position that will actually give stability for the club long term. I think that's why when you're bringing in someone that is the director of football, it does need to be someone probably with that sort of long-term approach to want to keep in that job, because that's where our sort of level of stability is going to be based on.
There's probably another kind of side way, if we want to look down a kind of Scottish route as well, of, somebody of the ilk of like Dougie Freedman, for example, over at Crystal Palace. He's been there now, I want to say he's been doing the job probably for, what's that, maybe about 5 years now? Give or take about 5 years. You do wonder if he maybe fancies maybe a fresh change of scenery, but again, no, it's, Premier League and Premier League salary that comes with that. But I think some roles like this, you can't mess about with. If we want to get it right and we want to do it properly, then you have to pay the money that's going rate at the moment. And I think, I have this conversation on a daily basis, obviously professionally, with people of, look, you're not going to get the best talent, and unless you're going to pay the best kind of money for them. And sometimes in life, this is a role that's now been vacant properly for what, give or take about a season and a half now.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's not been filled in 18 months. And if you treat the role like a second-rate role within the club, then you're only ever going to receive second-rate candidates within it.
I think it'd be interesting to see if we could maybe tempt the likes of someone in a similar position at a Crystal Palace, at an Everton, at one of these sort of lower side of the Premier League tables to come in. So though they probably will get paid a bit more money without knowing the exact finances behind it, but it's a bit different from what they pay players. I don't think that the wage gap will be that large, I think, in these sort of roles of what we could offer to what they're offering. It's a bit different for players because obviously they'd be paying millions more, whereas it may be slightly different within their roles. But I think could be tempt even on less money. But coming in, I think Mitch, you touched on it earlier, that sort of the new challenges. Like, can you come into a team that play in Europe regularly every season, do compete for titles? Well, historically we did, and hopefully we will in the future. But do come in, they do challenge, they do try and win things. And it's a real unique environment, I think, to come into Glasgow and work, because you're coming into a team that is probably, other than Celtic, but a team like no other, like a rivalry like no other. It's a complete bubble in Glasgow. So I think it will have an appeal, I think, to some people. But it would just really be interesting. Mitch was saying about the wagey stuff. It'd be really interesting to see what that difference is. Like, what does a director of football at, say, a Crystal Palace get paid, and what do we pay? Because I'd be surprised if there was a massive gap, just with the type of role it is.
Sorry, Bernie, Kev. I don't actually think there's that much of a gap, if I'm being quite honest. As you're right, what you're saying, there's a big gap in obviously players, but in terms of coaches and management or things like that, they are going to be on more money, but I don't think it's going to be that much more. But I can't remember who was it just highlighted, but the director of football's got a senior position. So senior positions within any companies get paid the big bucks, don't they? So you're not going to have, as Mitch said, a second-rate, salary to a director of football. You're right, though. It's and one thing I'd like to make is that we've got Niels Coppin there is already doing the sort of the main of transfers and things like that. So director of football will be coming in, and that level of stress and that side of the job will be lessened because of Niels Coppin already being there in a senior position himself. So that's going to be, I think, an appealing proposition for a director of football to come into also, because not a lot of clubs are actually set up like that. How we are actually kind of set up with Niels Coppin, and obviously I know it's the early days yet, but the transfers that he's made, we're quite confident to be able to give him the sort of oversight of things going forward. And obviously having a director of football coming in and going side by side with him, I think is actually quite an appealing prospect for me anyway.
Do you know, so I've done a wee bit of and the internet's a terrible place as well, Mo, but I would say I've just done a quick look there, and the average salary for your director of football across the UK at the moment is about 200, we'll call it 236 grand a year, which when you break that down into a per week level, we're talking 5 grand a week, call it, without splitting too many hairs there. Like, we've got boys that are paying that in the academy right now. And I'm just going to pretend that I've never heard that there, Kev. I told you I was having a nice day before, and then we've had Rob bringing up Seema, and then you're bringing up. I'm telling you, I'm gonna have a similar hairdo to you by the end of this.
Who did you bring up, Kev?
Scott Wright. I said we paid Scott Wright about 5 grand a week there for years.
And then you came in here and ruined my day for free.
All right, guys. I think I'm wary of the time as well. I don't want to run on too much longer. So maybe just I'll throw back to one of the slides that we had previously. I think we've all touched on these points throughout the pod in terms of what we need in a director of football at the club. In terms of leading the football departments, supporting the delivery of silverware with the manager and the playing staff. Again, trying to improve or create and improve, the high standards and in terms of plans and culture around the club. And obviously the other points that are on the slide, we'll maybe just take each of them as they kind of drop down there. So, do you think there's any other points that we should have maybe added to the slide in terms of what we need in our director of football, in terms of working with the club on both sides of the park?
Probably not, to be quite honest. I think that pretty much covers everything. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned. Aye, it really does. I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's obviously difficult as well. It's there's probably other points that we could take out from each of the ones that are on the screen there. In terms of finances and everything else that surrounds the ins and outs at the club. Kev, what are your thoughts? Do you think there's anything else that you can think of that we could add to the main things that we should be our Niels Coppin and the footballing board should be looking for in terms of a director of football?
No, to be fair, and I think probably the most important one is the sort of creating and implementing a high level plan and culture of the club. I think that's probably the key one for me. I think that's going to be the main task for whoever comes into that role. Someone that's going to be able to, one, help in the meantime, but also plan for the future to keep things consistently going in the right way and to avoid the need for any rebuilds again in the future. We need someone that's going to help the club continuously evolve year on year, so we never find ourselves in a position that we were either this summer or actually last summer as well. So yeah, I wouldn't add anything to that. I think if we can get someone that can tick all the boxes, then we'll find ourselves a really good candidate.
And if we can get someone that doesn't want to give sleepless nights, that would be lovely.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're all agreed on that. I think it's definitely about bringing whoever the potential candidate or final candidate is. They need to match that balance of passion from the fans and the players on the playing side, and obviously a good business acumen in terms of trying to build, implement the trading model that we've consistently heard about for the last number of years, and try and improve upon our success in the transfer market, both incomings and outgoings. It's definitely a difficult job, but I'm sure there's someone out there that the club are looking at that they've identified as hopefully their preferred candidate or list of candidates, as we've mentioned earlier in the pod. All right, guys, I'll throw it open. Are there any other points or comments we want to make regarding director of football? Any other candidates that have come to mind since we've been talking about it for the last 45-50 minutes?
I think one of the key attributes for the job itself is, and obviously you kind of touched on it there as we were kind of going through is there's so much passion and so much feeling from all of us within the stands when it comes to Rangers, because let's be honest, that is a way of life up here, either side of the divide. I actually think the director of football needs to be somebody who's almost emotionless to all of that, and is the head and the composure and amongst all of it of whether things are going phenomenally in the park or things are going poorly in the park. They need to have an almost, I don't want to say serial killer vibes there, because we'll get ourselves demonetized for that, but we want to have somebody that's emotionless in it, that simply says factually, this is how we feel right now, this is what the business plan is. And actually I think having somebody probably strengthens the argument to have somebody who isn't an ex-player or somebody who has any ties to the club previous, because there's no emotion behind any decision making, whether that be from a managerial standpoint, or whether that be from a structural standpoint, whether that be even saying to people who are in existing jobs right now, look, no being funny, but thanks very much for your years of service, but your role's redundant now, because it can all be morphed into this. And I think that's maybe we're moving for that kind of, I don't want to say a slick Rick type operator, because we're not talking about Dino on a Saturday night here, but you know, we need somebody who is a bit of a smoother operator in that and has been there and done it. You know, I even look at guys that have, you know, been at Brentford, for example, took them from a League One club up to the Premiership, and you know, they've got them operating, surviving, and thriving there, you know, for years now.
Yeah, again, I can't disagree, Mitch. I think it's definitely something that we need, or I'm hoping that the club are looking at in terms of candidates and being able to align both, you know, on and off the park. I know it's easier said than done, and it's easier for us to come here and talk about it than it is to actually go and get the person that we want or the club want. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how the process develops over the coming weeks and months. I think you're right in what you said, Mitch.
Well, hey.
I know. I know.
Remember, I know where you live, Mr. Heron.
I know. So yeah, it's definitely come to that point where, you know, hopefully by the time the AGM comes around, they'll be further down the road and hopefully have announcements to make in the new year, which would hopefully give us a good start to the, you know, to the rest of the season and obviously into the transfer window for next summer. All right, guys. Don't want to hit over the hour mark, so we'll wrap it up there. Come to yourself, Kev. Any last comments or thanks to the viewers?
Last comments, just hopefully we start to get the finger out, and I think fans have definitely been patient. I think we've taken our time, which has been a good thing. But I think it's time to get the ball moving and trying to get the club in the right direction. But other than that, no. Thanks everyone for watching. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff.
Sure. Mitch, any last comments from yourself?
Just going to point out to answer our Paul's question there. Doug might have a bigger beard than I do, but mine smells like Christmas, and Doug's doesn't he?
I like that. Do you know any last comments from yourself?
Just to echo what Kev said there, fans have been patient, and there's only so much patience you can have. So if you're watching this, Rangers, get the finger out and give us a nice early Christmas present.
Aye, I can't disagree with that. You know, I think definitely something that we would thoroughly enjoy for the festive period. If we can get some movement on, you know, appointing some more, you know, good quality people into the club. You know, the CEO and chairman, I know we've touched on. I'm sure they'll be touched on in pods in the days and weeks to come. But yeah, the director of football is definitely a crucial part of that in terms of building up the footballing board and the board in general. But there's nothing left for me to say than thank Kev, Mitch and Dino for joining me this evening for the Director of Football Candidates pod. This has been the Rangers Journal. We've been sponsored by Premier VPN, so again, please go and check them out. We're in association with Mano and Inverclyde, so please go check them out. Good charity to get involved with. There's nothing left for me to say, but every night is a Rangers Journal night. Thanks everyone. Good night.